Let's all open the book to Genesis chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25, starting verse 19 to the end of the chapter. Now these are the records of the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac. And Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. And the Lord answered him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But the children struggled together within her. And she said, "If it is so, why then am I this way?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two people will be separated from your body. And the one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." When her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. Now the first came forth red, all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. And afterward his brother came forth with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter and man of the field, but Jacob was a peaceful man living in tents. Now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. When Jacob had cooked a stew, Esau came in from the field and was famished. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please let me have a swallow of that red stuff there, for I am famished." Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, "First sell me your birthright." Esau said, "Behold, I am about to die, so of what use is it to be the birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "First swear to me." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went on his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright.
Sometimes as we especially get the stories from the Bible as younger children, we tend to glorify those characters, the patriarchs, almost to where they become more than human to us. The beauty about doing a study like what we are doing, where we are taking chapter by chapter of the book of Genesis, is that we get to see them in all of their flaws. And perhaps as we read, like we were supposed to this week, and I know I skipped back in our scripture reading in order to get Jacob and Esau in their beginnings, but as we read for this week, it was from chapters 27 through 30, and next week we're going to be looking at chapters 31 through 35. As we do that, God allows us to see them with eyes that are, well, maybe that we've never seen before, because we grow. Don't we, as Christians and to our adulthood, and as we grow in knowledge, and we grow in our ability to assess. And so my question for you as we begin our study this morning is, how do you feel about Jacob in this story of Jacob and Esau? As these twins are born to Rebekah, Esau is the first and he is the older, and with that firstborn comes blessings. The birthright is mentioned here. But he also becomes one who has the right to rule the family. Whenever daddy dies, he is going to be the next patriarch. And so the birthright carries with it that connotation. He gets a double portion of the inheritance as the firstborn, or he should have gotten the double inheritance or the double blessing, and we'll get into that within the lesson. And then he also has the right to become the family priest. Within the patriarchal system, you don't have, like what you do within the Mosaic system, a particular tribe in order to be the priest. In the patriarchal system, it was passed down from one generation to the next through the firstborn son. And so the firstborn's birthright certainly is a double portion of inheritance, certainly the preeminence once daddy's gone, but also the right to be the family priest. Though Esau is only moments older than Jacob, all of that should have been Esau's as an inheritance. When Jacob's born, he is holding on to the heel of his brother. Has anybody ever tripped you intentionally? You had somebody that wanted to get even with you, and as you came walking by, they stuck out their leg, or they reached out and they tripped you and you went sprawling. Well, Jacob's name in Hebrew means the heel catcher, the one who grabs the heel of another in order to trip them up. And in its simplest form, it means the supplanter. All right, you're standing at the grocery store and every register is full. Well, every register that is open is full. And as you stand there in the line, somebody brushes past you, past your shoulder. They only have one item, but they get in front of you and they have the cashier ring them up instead. How do you feel? Are you aghast? Do you keep your mouth shut? Do you ram them with your cart? No, that is the image of the supplanter, the one who takes the place of another, the one who, not by right, but by deceit or by stealth, or what would we call it, by gall maybe, they step in front in order to receive the benefits. It's not simply a taking of a spotlight or the one that takes the glory from another, though it can have that part of it in its connotation as well. But as Jacob has a hold of his brother's heel, certainly within the mind of Isaac and Rebekah is this prophecy that the older shall serve the younger. Now, what I want us to understand is that I am wholly confident that though God said that to Rebekah, that she shared with Isaac and that they both knew. And I mean, how could you not, if you are a young mother with twins within your womb, not say to your husband after God talked to you and say, honey, he said that they're fighting in my womb and that they will always will. God told me that whenever these boys come forth, that they are going to be two nations. God told me, in fact, that the younger will serve the older, or at least he will be the one that rules over his elder. Do you think that she kept that from Isaac? I don't think that she did. Does Isaac have a connection with God? Well, we saw last week him walk with his father Abraham to the altar, submit to being bound and to being laid upon the altar, whether he was a young man, 12 years old, or a little bit older, a young man. We know that Isaac knows about God, and he puts stock in whatever God says, or at least we would think. As these boys grow, they are very, very different in nature. I mean, Esau looks like a shag carpet, and Jacob is smooth-skinned, and he is a mama's boy. Now, what that tells me is he's maybe a little bit more cerebral. He's a little more insightful, perhaps intuitive. He is one who seems to be able to navigate behind the scenes very well. And all of those, I believe, are traits that he has received from his mother's genes as well as his mother's side of the family, because he is going to spend some time with his uncle on that side. And what he's going to find out is that he is a whole lot like his uncle and not as much like his dad. Laban is a whole lot like Jacob. And in fact, Jacob gets a little frustrated in dealing with Laban, his father-in-law, twice over, 3 times over, 4 times over, his father-in-law, and he gets a little frustrated. And in fact, by the end of it, he says, these 10 times you have received me, but God has continued to bless me. But as you read that, these 10 times you have deceived me, but God has continued to bless me, you almost think, well, yeah, but it really couldn't have happened to a more deserving man. Why does God? Here's my question, okay? And you may have asked yourself this as you read through these chapters yourself. Why does God use seemingly a flawed individual in order to perpetrate his promises? Could he not have found somebody a little bit more suitable? Somebody a little bit more capable of looking to as an example? Somebody who seems to fit the character mold of a little bit better than what Jacob does? Must he use the supplanter in order to accomplish his will? And I want you to just hold on to that thought. If you weren't already thinking of that, hold on to that thought, and we're going to come back to it at the end of the lesson. And I think that we can draw some conclusions about the character and the nature of God. Esau is a man of the field. Esau is a hunter. Esau is an outdoorsman. Esau evidently cares very little about tradition, about inheritance, about family, or about his place in all of those things. Do you know who Esau probably thinks about the most? Esau probably thinks about Esau the most. Esau wakes up in the morning thinking about Esau. Maybe he gets his mind off of Esau while he is out shooting for game, but probably not. He still probably wants the biggest and the best trophy, and so he goes to bed thinking about Esau. And the story that we just related, he's hungry, and the main thing for him is to fill his stomach, and who cares what he has to forfeit in the process? But then as you contrast that with Jacob, and what happens as Jacob appears to be thinking that he is nearing the end of his life, and he calls Esau to him, and by the way, Rebekah is eavesdropping on this. He calls Esau to him, and he says to Esau, I want you to go out and to gather game for me, because I love to eat your wild game, and whenever you get back, I am going to bless you. Well, what blessings is he going to give him? Well, if you read those chapters, you know that the blessings that are in store are the blessings of the firstborn. It's the right of the firstborn. Well, what does that entail? It's a double portion, the fat of the land, also the ruling of the family, meaning that he is going to be ruling over his brother. The fact that he gives this blessing, unbeknownst to him, to the younger brother, thinking that it was Esau, shows that Isaac's intent was to give those blessings to Esau. Now we have to step back and to question what's going on here, right? Did not Isaac know those prophecies, and the older shall serve the younger? Certainly he did know those. Then what in the world is Isaac doing trying to thwart the will of God? How are you doing spiritually? I want you to think back upon the time whenever you were converted, whenever you came to the Lord, whenever you were baptized into Christ and you had your sins washed away. Weren't you relatively new to the faith? And probably most of us were, maybe even young in years. How is it now with you as you compare yourself to your old self? Have you grown? Are you stronger? Are you more mature, more knowledgeable? Is your relationship with God not quite all that it should be, but it is better yet? Or have you found yourself slipping? And in fact, you look back on your life and you don't really see a steady growth, but just kind of these highs and these lows, and you see times of rejoicing and you see times of struggle. That's human nature, isn't it? That's especially Isaac. I believe Isaac at this point in his life is at a low. Whether he comes out of it or not, I don't know. We just don't have any indication that he does. Just adding up some of the things as you try to piece it together, because he is 40 years old whenever he marries Rebekah. He is 60 years old whenever the boys are born. Isaac is probably 137. If you do your math, you go back, you try to figure out just how old he is right now. He is right now 137 years old. Now, just as an aside, if he has Jacob and Esau whenever he is 60, how old are they? They're pretty old. And in fact, Jacob is probably 77 years old. Do you ever visualize Jacob being 77 years old as he leaves his home and goes to the land of Padan-aram and finds his family, and he's going to live with his relatives and marry 2 wives and have 2 concubines and have 12 children and a son? Do you visualize him being 77 and somewhere around 97 whenever he comes back home? Well, if my math is correct, and you can do this on your own, but though Isaac thinks he is old and his eyes are dim and he relatively is a needy person, he is going to live another 43 years after this blessing. He is still around whenever Jacob comes back from Padan-aram, and Jacob and Esau as brothers bury him at the age of 180. And so you do your math, 43 and 77, and how old is Jacob and Esau whenever their father dies? They are 120 years old by the time they are standing in front of that cave of Isaac's funeral at Machpelah. What am I saying? I think that Isaac is in a low ebb of his life. And he's not nearing death, but he thinks that he is, because that's how we get whenever we're a little bit low spiritually. We just think that the world is crashing in on us. And so he's ready now to leave this world and bless his favorite son, despite what the prophecies are, despite what he and his wife know to be the will of God. And he is ready to preempt and usurp God's will. Now, I hope that in this process that I'm not being too hard on Isaac, but I do want to be a little bit more lenient on Jacob and Rebekah, because they do deceive. And in fact, Jacob openly lies to his father. Is that really you? He says, yes, it's me, Esau, as Jacob comes covered in goat's hair, bringing savory meat and proclaiming himself to be one of the best hunters there ever was. I mean, he can not only get the food quickly, he can whip it up in a hurry. He's a master chef to boot. And Isaac says, oh, I hear your voice, but it's the voice of Jacob, but your hands are hairy like Esau. And so he gets over and he begins to smell him, and he says, oh, you smell like Esau. Isn't that a wonderful image? I wonder what Esau smelled like. Ooh, it smells like Esau. Isaac, using what senses he has, the sense of smell, the sense of feeling, the sense of hearing, trying to identify, and all the while being deceived by the supplanter. So much so that he falls for it, and he blesses Jacob with the rights of the firstborn. And he says, from now on, you are going to be the one in control. Look at verse 27 with me. And he came close and he kissed him. And whenever he smelled the smell of his garments, he blessed him and he said, see, the smell of my son is like the smell of the field which the Lord has blessed. Now listen to what he blesses Jacob with. When in actuality, he thinks that he is blessing Esau. And think again of that prophecy that the younger is going to serve the older. Now may God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth, and an abundance of grain and new wine. May peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be master of your brothers, and may your mother's son bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you. Do you hear any overtones of Abraham's blessings from God within that? I hear a lot of those, very strong ones. I will bless those that bless you. I will curse those who curse you. Of you will come a mighty nation. Now there is one part of Abraham's blessing that is left out at this point, that through you all nations will be blessed. For some reason Isaac leaves that one out. But you look at what Isaac is doing, and Isaac is removing the hand of Jacob from the heel of his firstborn brother, and he is determining that I will, by my power, institute my firstborn as my heir, as the victor, as the controller of everything that is right and best for this family. He is going to be a master of his mother's son. Do you think there's any love lost between Isaac and Jacob? Now, I want you to imagine you're covered with goat hair, you're wearing your brother's clothes, and you are deceiving your blind father. What are you thinking as he gives these blessings that he thinks he's giving to Esau? I would be thinking, oh boy, I sure hope Daddy doesn't find out. And he actually said that to his mother. He said, Mom, do you know what's going to actually happen to me? If I go in there and he figures it out, I'm going to get a curse. And she says, let that curse be upon me. Well, whenever things sour with Esau and he decides that he's going to kill his brother, all of a sudden Rebekah doesn't take responsibility for that. She says, well, he wants to kill you for what you did. You think, well, thanks a lot for your support, Mom. And she encourages him in cahoots with Isaac to get him to leave the nest in a hurry. But as Jacob receives this blessing from his father, it must be with great mixed emotion, and there must be a whole platoon of butterflies within his stomach as he thinks about what his daddy wanted for him, because he thinks he's Esau. And what that actually would be is a curse from his dad if things were left as they were. And he lies to his dad 3 times outright at least. And you can read that in the account just prior to what I had. He is the supplanter. He is the deceiver. He's in cahoots with his mom. And you think about the marriage between Isaac and Rebekah, and this is not ideal. They have both played favorites with their children, and the family is almost to a civil war. And by hook or by crook, each one in the family is going to get what they want. I know I'm being pretty hard on Isaac, but it seems to me that he is flying in the face of God and God's will. And I'm often hard on Rebekah with what she sets up in this deception of her poor blind husband. But at the same time, Rebekah, by her estimation, is fulfilling the will of God in getting her son what is rightfully his, because she knows that her husband, through eavesdropping, she knows that her husband's design is the opposite. And as far as we can tell, there's no correction by God. And in fact, whenever Esau learns that his brother has stolen his birthright, he declares that I'm going to kill my brother as soon as dad dead, he doesn't know that that's going to be another 43 years from now, but they move Jacob out of the scene. And Jacob flees from the land of Canaan. And he goes back to the land of his mother, back to Haran. And he stops at a place to rest, and it's a place that the locals know as Luz. And he grabs a stone for his pillow, and as he lays there, God visits him, not with a reprimand, but with a promise. As he lays there and he dreams, and one of the commentaries says probably he's not sleeping on the rock. Probably the rock was there to protect his head. I don't know, I guess from attack. But he takes a rock later and he sets it up as a pillar. So it's quite the rock, okay? It's not just a tiny rock. But he must have been fairly good size. But as he lays there, he has this vision, and we call it Jacob's ladder, and that's how it's translated for us. And often we can see a ladder going up to heaven and angels ascending and descending. What it probably was like is pictured here, a ziggurat. If you want to know what a ziggurat is, they are those pyramid-shaped buildings within Mesopotamia that have a staircase that almost reach straight up to the sky. And it was within Mesopotamia mythology that said that you would build your temple in such a way that way the deities from the sky would be able to come down, or their minions would be able to come straight down to you building a place for them to walk. Well, as Jacob has this dream and the angels are ascending and descending upon the ladder, he wakes up and he says, truly I have been within the house of God. This is the doorway to God's house. And he calls it Bethel. El meaning God, Beth meaning house. Truly I have been within the house of God. And in the process, God has revealed to Jacob, and he says to him, yes, you are with me. I will bless you. I will take care of you. I will be your God, and I have been the God of your fathers, and you shall be to me as a son, and I will always go with you no matter where you go. Reaffirming. I mean, not correcting, not rebuking, but saying to Jacob simply, I am your God. I'm here for you. And as you go away from your parents, I am with you. And Jacob says, if all of that is true, is how it's usually translated within the Bible, what it could actually be translated is a little bit more of faith. It could be, since all of that is true, I will allow you to be my God and I will follow you. A large statement of faith by Jacob. Now, what's important here is the location. Because in the mentality of the people at that time, now Abraham has gotten over this to a large extent, but Jacob goes to Laban, and Laban still has household gods, and we'll get into that next week with those household gods. They're still wrapped up in idolatry. But in this time, within the religious mindset, gods were localized. And perhaps that's why Abraham sends Eliezer, his servant, to Haran in order to pick a wife for his son. And rather than sending Isaac there, because he didn't dare send his son back where God's protection and providence was. I don't know that for a fact, but it could have been the fact that Abraham is still coming out of that culture. Well, by the time we get to Abraham's son, Isaac and Rebekah, they're willing to send Jacob on a journey to a faraway land away from Canaan, not worried about the promises being fulfilled or the providence of God that he was going to be with them, because maybe that servant came back from Laban, and they have identified, well, God is not just a God of one place, he is a God that is everywhere. And as God visits Jacob in Bethel, he's already left his home country, and God says to him, I'm not only here with you in Bethel, you're right, but I am going to be with you and bless you and make you a wealthy man. And Jacob mentally makes that transition as well, that God is everywhere. Now that's a concept that is battled all the way up until the time of Jonah. Remember, Jonah thought that he could flee from God. But God confirms, Jacob, you're away from dad, you're away from mom, you've just jumped out of the nest and you are flying on your own. I will be the wind underneath your wings. You just keep on flying, son. Now, Rebekah, when she turned Jacob loose, she said, I'll let you know in just a few days whenever you can come home. As far as we can tell, he never sees his mother again, because it's 20 years before Jacob returns. He works 7 years for Rachel and he gets Leah. There's Laban within that. He works for another 7 years to get Rachel. There's 14. And then finally he has a son by Rachel, the wife that he loves, and he turns to Laban and he says, it's time for me to go. What are my wages? And he says, I don't know. What would you like? And he says, give me the spotted, the striped, give me the blemished animals, and that will be my wages. And he works another 6 years. So 7 plus 6, what does that add up to? Well, he comes back, and with his wives, 20 years later, with his 11 sons, not Benjamin yet, with his daughter, Dinah, he comes back a wealthy man, and God has kept his promises. So let me ask you, does that bother you? Because God blessed a man who is called the Supplanter. Does that bother you that he lied to his own father. He was in cahoots with his mother. Does it bother you that he almost appears to be bargaining a little bit with God in the process? And I don't think that there is a single one of us that would say that Jacob deserves to receive God's blessing. I think that every one of us would say that what he would be deserving is probably punishment for some of the things that he did. We'll get into his name being changed next week from Jacob to Israel, meaning one who wrestles with God and God prevails. That's our next lesson. But the problem really is not Jacob, it's me. Because what I see in Jacob is a whole lot of myself. Can you tell me that you deserve God's blessing? Can you tell me that you deserve God's mercy, that you deserve salvation? And no, and that's where I find comfort in the faults of Abraham. That's where I find comfort in the lows of the life of Isaac and Rebekah. That's where I find even in the deception of one called Jacob the Supplanter, because we too have grabbed a hold of the heel of the firstborn, and he has taken place and given us the rights of the inheritance. The supplanter, call me Jacob, as we stand and as we sing.